everyone. How are you? Leadership tomorrow in the house? What? Stop. While we were off stage, we had a really big conversation about periomenopause. Yeah, I mean, do we want to switch into that topic tonight or stick with this one? Like, hair's growing out of places I didn't expect it to grow out of. I'm hot, I'm cold, I'm hairy, I'm annoyed. So, I don't know. During this conversation, we might see, am I annoyed at well-meaning liberals or just at everything? I don't know. I'm so happy to bring up this amazing panel this evening. We're going to get right into it because there's just so much to cover and we do not have enough time to do it. The topic today is unlearning the well-meaning liberal, and this is going to be a big conversation, so I'm going to ask us to start with a breath together. Just find your feet on the ground. Find your back on the chair. And let's take a deep inhale in. And see, I'm even annoyed by the sound of your breathing. And let's exhale out. Just kidding. Look at them. Oh, this is going to be so good. Joel Fariss is a social philosopher, futurist, and co-founder of the Holon Institute, a Seattle-based nonprofit think tank dedicated to cultivating the relational conditions for human and ecological thriving in a time of profound planetary and civilizational transformation. Don't worry, he is going to break down all of those multisyllabic words for you. Joel Fariss, would you join us on stage? Give him a big hand. Did I get it right? Also joining us is Ruchika T. Malhotra, the best-selling author of Inclusion on Purpose, an intersectional approach to creating a culture of belonging at work. Ruchika is also the founder of Candor, an inclusion strategy practice, a former international business journalist. Ruchika is a regular contributor to the New York Times and Harvard Business Review. Would you join us on stage, madam? Yes. Yes. Thank you for being here. Have a seat. Let us get you right here.
Oh, goodness.
You front and center.
Oh, my
yes,
goodness.
I'm just the facilitator.
Just,
yes. That might be something we talk about today. I've been really embracing this idea of just. Because for so long I have felt like I needed to be many things to be worthy. And now I'm trying to be just an artist.
the most important thing of our time, I think the only way we can process this time is through art. So, in fact, it's so top of mind because this morning I went to see the Ai Weiwei exhibit at the Seattle Art Museum. Please go if you haven't. Please go again if you have, and again and again. Because I really think art is so necessary for us to be grounded in this time.
Yes.
And for us to be able to figure out how do we make sense of what's going on.
Yes. Without pursuing my dream of being a singer, which Taylor told me is not my talent. So, yeah. Don't say all for that.
We need to hear some proof of this, if you like, at some point, and then we get to decide.
I will sing Espresso to you later. I know that's your jam.
That's my favorite song.
We're going to get into it today by playing this little game. So Joel helped us develop this even further today. I had an idea, and some of you might know the Culture Iceberg. Have you seen this at one of your DEI exercises that I'm sure all of you have done and took copious notes at? Lie to this DEI practitioner. Lie to me. So you might have seen the Culture Iceberg, but today we're going to play the well-meaning liberal iceberg. And what I want to ask you to to do, to engage in, or what are the things that you first think of? We're going to start at the top of the iceberg. When you think of the characterization of the well-meaning liberal.
I think the first thing that I think of is the notion of abiding by what's, safe and orderly and neat and in line, conformist, right? And so when there's a call for justice, there's kind of the reliance on, well, justice, yes, but like order in the law, right? It's kind of that kind of dynamic.
Yes.
It's the first thing I think of.
Yes. How about for you?
Yeah, for me, living here, it's specifically maybe this part of the world, is that nice versus kind dichotomy, right?
Explain that. What's nice?
I mean, Seattle is nice.
It's very nice.
Seattle is nice. It's, I'm getting wet in the rain, and I'm so sorry you're getting wet in the rain is nice. And then I'm going to get into my car and drive home. Is Seattle nice? And kind is, oh my goodness, you're getting wet in the rain. Please may I offer you a ride? Please may I offer you my umbrella? Please may I offer you my coat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we've talked about in some of our last unlearnings about the ways that certain communities are cultured towards niceness, right? Remember, we've talked about if I am cultured as a white woman, I am cultured to be nice, not necessarily kind, but I must always give the appearance of being nice. Versus black women, where we're cultured to be strong, or women of color are cultured to be strong. Would you say there's something different in coming from outside of the U.S. culture that you were invited to?
I mean, I think in the cultures, and I'm thinking of very specific, so I grew up in Asia, I'm of Indian descent, and I grew up in Singapore, so very much a mix of, Indian and Chinese and Malay and, quite a melting pot of cultures, actually. I would say that for women especially, there was definitely the need of the appearance of being niceness was very important, but so was kindness, and sometimes to the point of not sometimes, mostly to the point of overdoing that. And I actually have to say that and if we're getting really deep really quickly, I will say this, it has been actually observing largely black women's the way of how I have seen so many black women dear to me, the conditioning of being strong, and so much of kindness, like deep, true kindness, that has been really inspiring to me and helped me make sense a little bit of this conditioning of that you have to be nice and overly kind all the time at the cost of your own safety.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's get into that even more a little bit later. What are some of the things that are at the line? What would you say we see from the well-meaning liberal? Getting a little deeper.
I think learning the language of equity and inclusion, but not living the language.
Oh, say more about that.
I think there's a lot of vocabulary that, it's very accessible, right? I mean, you can read the book, you can watch the YouTube video, you can go to the event, and you can learn the language. There's a vocabulary and a lexicon, because language is really powerful. And so you can, pepper your speech with particular words that in some cases might signal, allyship or something. But there's no follow through, right? So there's no lived actual manifestation of the language itself, or the density of meaning that word as a container carries isn't actually carried, right?
Yes. So. Yes. If I hear one more person misuse my boundary when they're being held accountable, you've crossed my boundary. Oh, I don't know what'll happen, but just one more person.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We need to see. We need to make it happen on stage.
Don't get my ex-husband here. What's coming up for you? What's at the line?
You know, for me, it's cultural appreciation that is appropriation. And it really feels like it's on the line. And I think of this very deeply because I recently became certified to teach yoga. I don't. But I became certified. And in this practice, what I saw is really that very clear sort of like, I have so much that I can like extract from this culture that allows me to say the right things and behave in the right ways. That gives me a free pass to then never have to give up my own comfort.
Yes.
That's what's coming up for me there.
Yes. Which now it seems like we're getting below, right? Yeah. This comfort. What are the things down here? What are the things that are there under the surface that we rarely discuss?
I think the first word that you said when we first came out, this concept of I'm just this, right? And that to me, there's something there that this has actually been a conversation I've had with quite a few folks lately around enoughness. And I think that, there's this concept of self, and that we each have a story about who we are and how we relate to the world and what our role is and how we're supposed to show up. And so there's things that are conditioned, there's things that are innate, but then there's also the ways in which we metabolize our own traumas, our own biases, and those leak and come out in different ways, right? And I have found that behind a lot of this, when people are speaking to their own trauma or their own healing journey or why they behave in particular ways, that there's a really deep-seated belief of insufficiency. Yes. I'm not enough. And so I need to go acquire and accumulate, or I need to have this control over this environment or person, or I need to have this comfort, or, right? And so what we have is we just have a coping culture, ultimately, that is perpetuated through this constant, anesthesia of consumption and other things that get us, that ultimately impede our connection to our true selves and others in the world around us.
Yes, yes. As you're saying that, what's coming up for me is the hyperintellectualization, right? Nothing is going past here. Right. I often talk about it as just walking heads. Yeah. Nothing's impacting the heart or the body. It's all subjective, right? I'm omnipotent. I am back from community, from the work that relationship requires. Yeah. What's coming up for you?
I'd be remiss, and probably my publisher would fire me if I didn't say, but competition. It is on my mind and has been on my mind for years on end, on how like a competitive, related to hustle at all costs, like not being enough, but overdoing it to prove that you're enough to try and fill that void. But that competition for me is really concerning. And I think it became so clear to me at a time where we were having, where it was safe to talk about DEI, where it was safe to talk about immigrant rights, where it was safe to say, a country invading another is a bad thing. It was safe to do that. And yet, what I saw was, as long as I don't have to, give anything up, because if I have to, step aside or give up something, if I don't, and just for me, obviously, the workplace is really at the core of what I do. So if someone who's not from my community gets promoted, intellectually, maybe I'm okay with it, but really in my heart, that means the competition, the stakes aren't the way they should be, right? And what that does to, I think, the well-meaning liberal is really have many of us reject true change, right? Because the worry is I don't want, backstage we talked about choosing choosing to opt out of the public school for private schools, right? Because you don't want your children to fall behind. They shouldn't fall on the sword, and I think that's really at the core for me under the iceberg, is that like, what will we lose out if we truly do the active work, the resistance work of making change?
Yes, yes. As you're saying that, and beautiful Claire, wherever you are, would you come grab this? Because I can't see these people, and that's making me sad. Hi.
I'm so excited to see these
I know.
people. It's so good.
We're missing them. Yeah. Do you mind? Thank you, friend.
Thank you.
As you're saying that, what's coming up is, and I think as a woman who is both engaged in this work almost every day, and then being cultured as a Black woman in this society, also at the bottom of that iceberg is I see a type of emotional fatigue, like no muscle, no strength. And that might be my bias, my own prejudice, but the type of emotional muscle to exist in this world aware of what this world is, and to constantly spend your days combating it, I find that the well-meaning liberal has absolutely none of that emotional strength, right? I'm tired, I'm worn out, I'm overstimulated, it's too much information, and that looks wonderful. I don't know if I'm angry or jealous. Does that make sense, what's coming up?
It makes total sense to me, and Joel, I'd love to hear what you think. I think with that is the never needing to build that emotional capacity or resilience. I mean, that is privilege at its greatest, deepest level, right? And even when I do, and by the way, I've never done the iceberg in any of the DEI work I've done, which is why I was a bit like, oh, what was I doing wrong?
That's definitely the lesson.
But the number one thing I say, and this is like privilege 101, that like when I'll go to an organization, I'll talk to a leader who is, but I've grown up poor and I've had a really rough time in life, and privilege. And yes, now I'm glad that I'm the CEO of what have you, but there was a time when, and I'm like, I don't doubt that at all, Chad. I really don't. and the emotional capacity, muscle, resilience of that is built from and we have littles backstage. We have little humans backstage of color. My own son, 9-year-old, is a boy of color, and it's went from very early, not day one obviously, but very early in your life, you have had to consider at every moment how people are going to receive you. Based on your skin color, on your name, on your hair, on what you have in your lunchbox. I mean, that emotional muscle that starts from so young and will still be relevant when you are the CEO. I mean, I have interviewed CEOs who have gotten off the private jet or were on their way, on their corporate jet, and were mistaken for the airline, stewardesses, because, women of color are not CEOs, right? So it follows you in a way that very few lack of privileges do, right? You can work around, and I think so much of the work of going under the iceberg is how much do we conform, as you said, right? How much do we learn to conform, to be palatable? And that lack of emotional muscle comes from never having to build it, never having to need to build it in the same way.
Yes. As you're saying that, Joel, I'm wondering, we often talk about the ways that people of color code switch, right? Similar to W.E.B. Du Bois's work around double consciousness, or we talk about in the communities of autism, we might talk about masking and all of that work. Is there an equivalent within being cultured as white of we're not going to call it code switching, but something where you know that you're playing the character of conformity?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's a few things here that I'm hesitant to oversimplify for a few reasons. And I'll speak quickly just to the conversation around emotional resilience. I think that what you said about privilege is spot on. Like, first I would just say that, like, it's just really damn hard to be a human, especially in this era, in the 21st century, period, regardless of your background, intersectionality, or otherwise. I think that different cultures, however, have different privileges in regards to how they process that difficulty. And I think that this is where there's a bit of a matrix here. And so I think in masculine white culture, for example, the disembodiment that we were talking about earlier is a virtue, right? And so it's not so much that we never were required to cultivate emotional resiliency. It was just that the way that emotional resiliency was modeled was to essentially stuff it, right? And so there's this idea of strength being like, that's the archetype that you want to conform to. And so I think that, I would say that I think that we're all emotional beings. You can't get away from having an emotional experience of life. I think how you learn to process your emotion, how you channel it, how you share it, right? Those are the differences. And I do think that some communities have more privilege in that space than others. And it is a privilege to be tired and to take rest, right? Absolutely. But to go back to your question more acutely, I think for men specifically, there is I can't be weak. And that is it's not necessarily like that we're code switching in and out of that, but it becomes the predominant archetype to be inhabited. And so what that does is it perpetuates this, not only disembodiment, but this inability to, I think, connect deeply and vulnerably and authentically. I think we wear these costumes, and we have to find ways to cope with that emotion that's being bottled, right? And so I think what ends up happening, and I would say that, I'm speaking from my experience as a white man, I would say this is probably true for many, that the coping self becomes the self that we believe to be our true self.
Wait, say that again. Somebody missed it in the back row.
The coping self becomes the self we mistake as our true self. And so we're like, oh, I do these things. I love, like, this is my community. These are the activities I do, and this is what I'm interested in. And yet all of those things, it's all about numbing and perpetuating the archetype of, whatever, the maleness or the strength or the personhood that you're trying to project. And so you grow into this person, and then at the end of the day, you kind of lose sight. Well, who am I really? Like, do I really like football and beer and the other bullshit stuff? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it feels so shallow, right? And I think that's what a lot of masculinity specifically is built on today, is these interests and activities that ultimately are just a male pursuit of some sense of like coping with the thing that they've stuffed. So,
May I just say that absolutely, and privilege is being able to numb that and then wage pain and really toxicity and war on
100%.
all around you, right?
Yeah,
And-
absolutely.
Yeah, and,
There's
and that's not afforded to
Yeah.
most other people.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. I think it's a really, really important point to highlight. And so, like, I mean, this is like for white folks. I heard a teacher say once, "Until we learn to grieve what we've lost, we'll keep taking from others." And I think that that's like such a powerful summation of the relationship between the white community and people of color, for sure, for that reason.
Yeah. What if I'm in the audience today and I'm like, well, but at least I'm not them. At least I voted this way. At least I live in liberal Seattle. At least I'm not like, Uncle Pete, who I don't even speak to anymore because, his politics offend me so much that, my resistance was removing Uncle Pete from the group chat, right? Like, aren't I a good person now? Didn't I win the war?
I think that's the hardest thing for me, right? That's so painful when I hear that because especially after the 2016 elections, there were a lot of people who came up to me and just said, like, I can't believe my family. I'm so upset. But you know what? I've set my boundaries with them. So I know. I was like, where it is.
That was it. That was the one.
I've set my boundaries and I removed
Yes.
them from, I don't talk to them. And I'm like, Uncle Pete is not going to listen to me, right? But it is your responsibility to engage, right? As hard as, speaking of that emotional, like, I'm tired, I want to take a rest. No. Like, this is where it's really important for you to lean in and have those conversations as much as you possibly can. Because I think that's where, I think that, like, well-meaning, like, because I'm, back to this individual self, like, I as the individual, I'm good, so that, like, I don't need to engage, right? Because I did my part, I voted, and I'm done. Huge concern.
Yeah. And so we titled this The Well-Meaning Liberal, growing from or stemming from Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assessment that it was white, well-meaning liberals that were going to be the biggest barrier to justice, to change. And so what is the fear from actually moving towards action? What is the thing that keeps people, and I don't even think it's apathy, although I'm open to being corrected, but a type of immobility. Just, I hear this word spiraling a lot. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to fight. What keeps people stuck there?
I mean, I'm hesitant to speak in universal terms. I think there's a lot of things happening for a lot of people. I think that so this is just I'll speak for my own kind of perspective as a white male. I think that what I'm seeing as someone with privilege who understands and operates within systems of power, I think I see the power for what it is sometimes, and I'm just really disheartened. And I'm looking for ways in which to engage the power on the power's terms with the same level of sophistication, with the same level of infrastructure, with the same level of financing, with the same level of, right, all of the things. And honestly, I'll be really honest, like I'm really struggling with this lately. Will a bottom-up resistance work? I don't know, honestly. And that's a difficult space to be in. And I think a lot of people kind of get stuck in that. And that's where, so it's not so much like apathy or immobilization, which I think is true. I do think that's a thing. I do think that also there's a lot of media and storytelling that like change only happens at like the individual scale, right? It's not our fault, it's your fault. Like if you just stopped doing the thing and did something different, right, everything would get better. And so there's a blame shifting that happens there that's really immobilizing. But I think we're in an interesting time in which the ways in which we facilitate change are going to have to begin to look radically different than they have.
Yes.
And so here's one of the things that we've been talking about at the Holon Institute is it really critical mass or is it critical relationships? Can we change the architecture of systems without changing system architects? And so I think there's something around dismantling shadow power that is baked into oppressive systems and somehow re-architecting that system to move away from the shadow power to healthy integrative power.
That's right.
Right? And I think that means that we need to some degree, like, yeah, we need the grassroots fight. Yes, we need the protest. Yes, we need that. And I think we need to reevaluate our strategy as liberals or as progressives or folks on the left, right? I think there's a reliance on what has historically been tractional. And because of that, we haven't stayed up to date. For example, I mean, the Republican Party quickly adopted AI.
That's right.
Super fast, right? While folks on the left are like, wow, is it ethical? All these things. And so there's this power dynamic there, right, that becomes really challenging to navigate. And so this is where I'm like, there's something about, like if you look at Gandhi, if you look at MLK, behind MLK you had Angela Davis, you had Black Panthers, and Malcolm X. There was like a show of force. There was actual strength and threat of violence there, right? And so I think that in the 60s and in that movement, you have people at the federal government saying, okay, we're going to work with MLK so that we don't have to resort to this, right? Same with Gandhi. The reason that the British didn't kill Gandhi is because there was 400 million Indian people just fed up with 20,000 British soldiers. They could have overtaken them so easily. And so the reason that Gandhi lived for as long as he did and wasn't killed by the British colonial empire was because they were holding at bay 400 million Indians who would have been furious had that happened, right? So this makes me think, like, was it really nonviolent activism that actually led to the change, or was it the threat of violence that led to the change? Now, there's all sorts of ethical complexities and problematic paths to go here, but it does have me wonder, what does this emergent future of social transformation look like, and what is it going to require? And it's a double bind in many ways. So anyway, that's more of a long-winded answer, but I do think that I would say that people are looking for that thing. I think that there's a I think a lot of progressive strategies feel anemic in comparison to the power that they're fighting against. And I think people are looking for the sharpness and for the leverage and for the, and it's hard to find. So yeah, and there's apathy and ambiguity and immobilization and all these other things that are ultimately rooted in comfort and privilege and right. So it's a very complex yes and kind of, I think, landscape right now.
Let me ask you a really dangerous question.
Are you looking at me?
Yeah, both of you. Luckily, 80% of our industry has already been decimated,
Yes.
so I'm not afraid of losing work.
Oh, no. Done.
It's really easy to build a coalition with people that look and think like me.
Yeah.
The thing about liberalness, at least in the United States, is that it's representing so many different groups and ideas and visions of what is emerging. And I find myself wondering and listening to clients, is there an element, and you talk about this a little bit in the book around this idea of competition, is there a fear within the liberal coalition that eventually that violence from the Black people is going to come up? That violence from the Latinx community is going to come up. That violence from the queer community is going to come up. And they'll turn on us within the white liberal community first. And I ask this because a little bit, during the Black Lives Matter movement, there was, whoa, they're too angry. And now, in this moment, you have especially Black women saying, like, I'm going to be at cocktails while you all are at the protest. I certainly know I was at cocktails on Saturday while y'all were at the protest. Because I was like, I do my work in this space every day.
Yeah.
I don't need 3 hours on a Saturday to show my receipts.
Yeah.
Is there an element that within our coalition, there's still fear to work collectively?
There's deep racism. There is deep anti-Blackness, is what it is. Yes, of course. And, I'll speak more actually to the coalition that I have dreamt of forming and that has not formed, and that is between more especially South Asian and South Asian Americans, and really, it's especially the Black coalition, but really just the coalition that's fighting for change. The real, the grassroots movements that are saying, we want change. And I think so much of it is because of the history of coming in with scarcity, of being brought in by white supremacy to, be pitted against Black Americans as the model minority, which we know harms everyone. And it's this deep fear of A, what will I lose by forming a real coalition? And B, I'm scared of the violence. I'm scared. I'm just here to keep my head down. And I get where it comes from, right? I'm not oversimplifying, and I'm not in the blame game of you need to be marching when you might be undocumented, or you need to be forming coalitions when you're worried about putting food on the table. That's not the point. The point is, of course, the system was designed to keep so many people fearful and scared and in harm all the time. And I think for me that has been so instructive to see where there's natural coalition. Sometimes there's one, it can take that step further, right? It's a step further, I would imagine, obviously not identifying as white, not being white, not even being mistaken for being white. I would imagine there's a little bit of an additional step that would understand why our collective liberation lies in us being collectively liberated and collectively fighting for it. But as people of color who are non-Black, non-Indigenous, the reason for coalition is so clear, and yet there is so much of fear because of the way systems were designed. So for me, in my lifetime, that would be the biggest. For me, that is an area where I would like to believe I can, affect change. And so for me, that is my responsibility, to be honest. That's something that I deeply want to see shift. in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wrestling with this a little bit because yes, coalitions, and of course. And is that going to get us there?
No.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I
No.
think there's something here that's like, for me, it feels, one of my colleagues, we were having lunch today, Trace, and he was saying how this is a moment in human history, in the history of our species, evolutionarily speaking, in which we either make the profound jump just as we went from a single cell to a multi-cell organism. Like, that's how profound this jump needs to be in the fundamental ontologies. All of the presuppositions about what it means to be human need to be redefined radically to get us to the other side,
right.
where we have a future as a civilization. And so to me, I think, like, yes, coalition, yes, activism, yes, organizing, yes, and I feel like there's a human developmental bottleneck fundamentally that comes back down to if you are not, one, aware of your shadow and your trauma and your pain, and two, you're not actively working to heal it, integrate it, and three, in the process, understanding that the entire narrative, mythology, and structure of your personhood built on this notion of being a self-contained individual is farcical. That has to happen. Like, it's not just a coalition of, like, let's go build a coalition of folks who are like-minded. It's like, fundamentally, I need to move and shift my paradigm from what does it mean to be human today to what does it mean to be a planet today? Like, take away the sun, instantly we're all gone, right? So take away gravity, instantly we're gone, right? We're so wildly entangled with each other and the world around us. I think this is more than a human issue. I think this is a transhuman issue in the sense that, like, we are cells as a part of a bigger organism. And we need to make that jump from I'm a single cell to multi-cell organism, right? That I am you and you are me. And I am the tree and the tree is me.
Yep.
And I am inextricable from the sun and from the air and the gravity that holds our atmosphere and from the bees collecting pollen, and right? Like, these are my brothers and my sisters, and I am this. And so we are this. And I think until we actually begin to live like that, I think that the coalitions are going to continue hitting walls, right? And so I think we're hitting a developmental bottleneck for our species, and that's the thing that we need to overcome. And fundamentally, it means we got to do our work. We got to face our shadows. We need to heal our traumas.
You know, Joel, what worries me so much is how much, and I know it's different, and I know being in, like, liberal Seattle is the reason for this, but I love how so many young humans that I know in my life, like, get that. They, like, fundamentally get that, right? Like, I am you, you are me, like, they fundamentally get that. And it is literally, and, you know, really using violent terminology here, it is in some ways like beaten out of our children, right? Like of younger generations as they progress, right? And of course, like for me, I'm thinking of the education system, and then the workplace, and then society, and then the way we are absolutely devastating our planet in every way. And so for me, I'm like, at a practical way, how do we make it so that a lot of what I think, again, they fundamentally understand, right? Like if you see a young child around an animal, or you see a young child around even like trees and nature, which again, the science says, the neuroscience says, like how much our bodies, even as adults, you know, benefit from just being in trees and being in nature, et cetera, et cetera. Like how do we make it so that that remains on a continuum? Like we're not, it doesn't get removed from us. And I think for me, that is like a big question. That is the one where I'm kind of grappling with. Like, how do we keep that and have it follow us and rewarded throughout a lifetime, right? And that becomes, and again, something that indigenous wisdom, many, many ancient traditions, of course, I'm thinking about yogic philosophy, said like, this is like part of what we were taught. And then because of Western science, intellectualism, a lot of the ways that, you talked about, masculinity and being rewarded for like, yourself as an individual, how much we lost in those traditions. In some ways, there is, yes, how do we make this fundamental change to meet this moment that we're in? But let's not forget that like our ancestors, or many of our ancestors, grappled with this. And there's a lot that we can learn there too.
Yes. But then we have to wait for it to be validated by somebody who did a drug trip, with some mushrooms. And now it's real science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can't think of any examples.
Insert fucking eye roll.
I think this is really, I want to tie this back specifically for white folks, because what you're talking to is you're talking to a remembrance, right? And I think that whiteness as a construct has obliterated true identity and the heritage and the inheritance of heritage for folks who today I would identify as white, right? And I do think this goes back to my previous statement about like, hey, until we can learn to grieve what we've lost, we'll continue to take. And so I think there's something about for white folks, part of our work is to actually face the trauma of the identity that was lost, of the heritage that was lost, of the inheritance that was lost in our lineage, right? Going back to wherever it was that our ancestors came from. Europe was colonized by the Empire of Rome, right? And a lot of the indigenous cultures of Northern Europe, where many white people come from, those cultures were obliterated. And I think we probably carry some of that trauma. So I think there's something there about like, this is why I think the question of who am I? What does it mean to be me fundamentally? And shedding whiteness and getting underneath and getting to remembering, right? And beginning to lean into the wisdoms that still remain, have been resilient for millennia, that we can reclaim and re-embody and can begin to live. That is going to give, it has for me so much more courage than anything else that I've ever done, to stand in solidarity as an ally, to put my body on the line when it needs to be, and to really begin living out the difference and not just using the language. It has been a journey of remembrance. It has been a journey of reclaiming that. And it's not new. We don't need new. We're drowning in new ideas. We don't need any more.
No.
So anyways, I'll stop there. But
yeah, and just really quickly on a practical level too. So a mistake I made, throughout my career, was this belief like you didn't have to like really give something up, right? Like a rising tide lifts all boats. So therefore, like, especially, and I'm thinking of like in the DEI work, like you don't exactly have to give up your role, or you don't have to, like, it's about like, can you create more opportunities, etc. And that was a mistake. I think this time in history actually asks us to say like, no, it requires us to like give up things, give up nice things, maybe even, right, to make change. And I think that is related to this idea of like, it can only come from when you have healed a lot of those shadows and the trauma that you're talking about.
I heard the sound of 30 people fighting the urge to grasp their pearls. They were like, don't touch yourself. We're going to invite people up to ask some questions
Brave folks.
of this brilliant panel. And so this mic is here.
Wow, the
Do we already
lights
have
came
some?
on. Woo.
Hello, everybody. If you would like to ask a question in person, please feel free to come up to this microphone where I'm standing right now to ask your question for this panel. We do have a couple virtual questions, so I'll get the ball rolling with one of those. Is the difference between white liberals and white conservatives out here, USA and the Pacific Northwest, that white conservatives are willing to do more to support their values? If so, what feeds this disparity?
Such a good
I
one.
would
I
say
mean, I've
in
thought
my
too, but
in
yeah.
my work,
Yes.
yes. You know, I would say working with people all across this country, all across the world, I find that if we're breaking it into conservatives and liberals, that there is much more of these are my stated values and these are the actions I'm going to take. Whereas, as you said earlier, Joel, there's an element within liberalism of these are my stated values and I bought a sign.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think people are very good on, you know, and I'm thinking of like conservative movements, like, yes, outside the United States as well. I'm thinking of like India and things like that. There's a fundamental sense of belongingness at a very base level and very much using fear mongering and sort of othering. And, you know, there's this belief that I was really fascinated to read this research. There's this belief like we're hardwired as humans to compete, right? Like biologically, like we're hardwired. No, actually, the research says the reason why we have outlasted and lived so long is actually because we're so good at collaboration.
Yes.
We're so good at collaboration. We're so good at uniting against a common predator. And how that has been used in this day and age is to other people and unite against a very common enemy, right? And I think conservatives do that really well, and they create a sense of belonging based on like, that's the predator, that group is the predator, and you belong here. And I think that is one of the levers that I think we need to learn how to pull when it comes to liberals, right? It needs to be very, very focused, and it needs to be very clear what's at stake.
Yeah.
I think there's a few things at play. I do think there are actually a lot of values that conservatives and liberals would align on. I think there's things like, can we agree that, you know, we love and appreciate our families, and we enjoy, you know, family holidays, and we enjoy having kind neighbors who will get our backs, and like those are all things that I think, you know, that we kind of agree on. I do think that there's a difference between like values and beliefs, and I would say that the just speaking in generalities, this is not true across the board, that a more conservative population has a belief system that is, what's the right word? Like, one, it's more aligned with the systems and structures of power. Two, it's really dense, and it's a belief system that is very conformity-based. So you're in or you're out. If you don't believe this, you're out.
That's right.
Right? And so I think what that does is it actually creates really strong sense of belonging. Of course, that can become cultish, and we've seen all the ways that plays out. And I don't think that, I think that's something that folks on the maybe more liberal side of things, because there's more of a diversity of beliefs, there might be less like social cohesion because we don't have one singular shared mythology that's driving our collective, right? So yeah, there's some interesting dynamics there. I'm sure there's like some great papers sociologically that have been written on that kind of stuff, but
Yeah. And what I would add to what you would say is that I think that we see more similarities in the actions even if the beliefs are believed to be different.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that is very apropos
Yeah.
to what we're talking about
Yeah.
in the well-meaning liberal.
And I just want to, yes, I promise it's very quick. And that is the challenge of binary thinking
Yep.
that has also come from white supremacist beliefs and has also resulted in a two-party system,
That's right.
right?
Right.
That is what has led us to where we are right now.
Yes.
I have so many thoughts about that question, but I'm not on the panel, so I'm just going to ask my question.
Get you up here another time.
And one, I would add the socialists to your list of violence and the New Deal. We got the New Deal
Yeah.
because FDR said, because the socialists were actually burning down cities. I am not looking for reassurance, but I have this thought that when you look in the dictionary under well-meaning liberal, you see my picture. And so here's what I want to know is, what are the 3 questions I need to ask myself to figure out if that is true or not? And if it is true for me or anybody else in the world who might see this, what are the 3 things I need to do besides go to therapy, which I am in, both, individual and couples. But besides go to therapy, what are the 3 things that I need to do to move out of well-meaning liberal to what is the name for the thing I want to be?
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a tough question. I'd be very curious about your answer on this. Sorry to put you on the spot. I know.
Let's work backwards. I like the idea of what is emerging, what is where I might go. And in my own life, knowing that I also am in the work, I am also needing to unlearn the ways that I have been conditioned to white supremacy, conditioned to ableism, to homophobia and transphobia. In my own life, and we've talked about this in some past Unlearning episodes, the word that I use and Joseph Moreno used is source, right? At source, all of the labels disappear. And as I think Joel and Ruchika have described in many ways, that is that oneness with all things. And for me, in my faith practice, one of the things that I'm constantly trying to work on is to see the face of God in everything I encounter. And when I know that, for me, there's a type of peace. There's a type of peace. And so in my own practice, what I am constantly checking in with myself when I am receiving information when I failed, I missed the mark, I didn't bring to the relationship what I hoped to bring, is I'm checking my defensiveness, where I want to prioritize my rightness over the offering that's been given to me. There's a checking in with, to use language that we've used today, when I am performing goodness as opposed to playing, being Lindsey. And there's a type of, I don't have a word for this, it's something that exists here. When I feel that my actions, the choice that I make, some of the LT people here that I've worked with recently, we talk about it, the rock. My rock of my values is grounding the decision that I'm about to make. And in some of the storytelling that we've done, and Joel was a big part of my life when I was going through something where I had to give something up to be holding the rock of my values. I had to give up a lot of money. A lot of money. But I was not going to continue to work with somebody who thought that my trans employees were less than. It wasn't worth the success of the company to give up myself and their safety. And so I'm not sure if any of that is useful, but I offer that as that's what my daily practice looks like. And for me, attempting to be more than a well-meaning ally in the LGBTQIA++ fight, in the fight against ableism, in the fight against sizeism and fat shaming. And if I, at the end of the day, do not feel exhausted by the effort that I have expended, I think I'm just well-meaning. Is that useful at all?
That's so good.
Offerings?
It's so good. The questions for me, what I heard there was, what am I giving up today, and what am I willing to give up? Separate from this is, there's a statistic which I think I felt the most when I moved to Seattle. So I've lived in the United States. I've lived in New York, Atlanta, and then Seattle. Seattle the longest and the most recent. I did not feel this in Atlanta or New York the way I do feel it in Seattle, but there's a statistic from PRRI that 3/4 of white people don't have a single friend of color, and 91% of the average white person's social network is white. And so in Seattle, how that translated is I would walk through neighborhoods with large Black Lives Matter signs, silence is violence, blah, blah, blah. Nobody there had any Black friends. There were no Black people living in that neighborhood. And we know many, 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 many neighborhoods like that here in Seattle. So for me, if I was to ask myself that question, and I did I do it regularly, and then adding to that, how do I show up, for communities that I'm not physically part of, right? It is asking, who are the people whose opinions and voices and thoughts and it's more than that, who would I trust? Who do I trust? What are their identities? And how much do those identities look like the ones I have? Yeah. And how many of not my identities do I have in my life? I think for me that's really important.
There's two questions that are coming up for me. I think one is, where does the ache of lack live in my body? Mm-hmm. I'm really getting familiar with that. And then asking, where did that come from? Mm-hmm. Why has it been there for so long? Did someone put it there? Why do I think interrogating that, I think, is a really important first step. I think the second thing is, what am I withholding because I don't understand? I think that there's a really a common thing among well-intended liberals. They withhold support, they withhold allyship, they withhold something or even affirmation because they don't understand the lived experience of the person who's asking for their allyship. Right? I don't know what it means to be trans. I don't know what it means to be Black. I can't understand that experience. Because I can't understand it, I'm not going to support it. And so I think that we need to get past this, and this to me is symptomatic of the whole head up, right, disembodied ways in which we engage with the world around us. because we've over-indexed on the intellect and the cognitive, we believe that so much gets predicated on our understanding. And so I think there's a withholding until we understand. And so the question, what am I withholding until I understand? And is understanding the precondition for my participation in the justice that I'm being summoned to? And then I'll add one more bonus. We talked about this a little bit early. This is, the philosopher Jacques Derrida has a really great, just go study his stuff on justice. And one of the things that he interrogates, the relationship between law and justice. And there's a proclivity among the well-meaning liberal, again, we spoke about this a little bit, to conform to kind of the neat and orderly way of going about things. And so the way that Derrida talks about it, he says, we will respond to the summons of justice so long as that response is sanctioned by law.
Yep.
And I think that's a tension that we need to stand in and we need to interrogate. Am I willing to respond to the summons of justice even if that response is not sanctioned by law? I'm not a lawyer, I'm not telling you to do anything.
Good.
Just saying.
I heard
it's
Joel
a
say go out and
question-
write.
I'm like,
That's what
It's a question
like,
to sit
wow.
with.
heard him say, right?
Question to sit
That's-
with.
Yeah.
And Joel, I really, you are so thoughtful, and I worry sometimes, and I have witnessed what it's like when it's like, all right, like, okay, I get it. So that means like I must turn the mic to myself and speak up for everyone else because like these poor people who have had such a rough go, like I am the ally, right? And you are so thoughtful, and my concern sometimes is what happens when people aren't thoughtful. Like they're like, okay, I like cognitively understand, like I may not be part of the trans community, or I may not be a person of color, or I may not be Black, but I am going to be. And how much of this is like learning to understand it in your body, learning to practice that allyship, and also making sure that people who have been silenced get to speak, right? It like, for me, that has been, and I think that was the concern I saw coming out of the 2020, especially after the murder of George Floyd, like this whole like I, there were many well-meaning liberals who were like, well, now I'm going to be the one writing the op-eds, and I'm going to be the one crying on TV, and I'm the one who, like.
Yeah.
So I think there's an innate tension there that I want to name.
Yeah, there is definitely an innate tension there. I also think like, God, what's that? There's a quote that's like, I'll take an enthusiastic amateur over an apathetic professional.
That's right. That's right.
Right? Like I think that there's something to, because there's also, there's well-meaning liberals, and then there's just like people who don't give a shit. Like, which one would you take?
Yeah.
So I think I do think there is some level of like, this is messy work.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's sloppy, and it isn't always thoughtful. And there's a level of discomfort. I think the thing for white folks specifically is like, it is not the responsibility of the oppressed to educate you on how to not be an oppressor.
Yeah.
Right? So like, find your white friends who are doing the hard work,
Yeah.
read the books,
Yes.
search the YouTube videos, right? Don't go to your Black friend and be like, hey man, how do I, like that's not their job. And I know that because I've done that. I've been that person. And I've made those mistakes, and I've been very unthoughtful, and I've been messy. And so I think there's a certain level of fumbling that this is going to take and require. But it's the nature of human growth. So.
And that there's no reward, I think, is the last thing. Like there's no, like if you expect a cookie, there are no cookies. And there are people who have lost huge amount of business and work and are still in it. So there's no cookie. I talk about it as planting seeds for a tree whose shade you will never get to sit under, and it is still worth planting those seeds.
Yeah. There's no cookie,
There's no cookie.
and there's a piece at the end of the day.
That's
Right.
the cookie, maybe.
That's the cookie, I think. It's a red velvet cake with cream cheese
Beautiful.
frosting, right?
I love it.
I often, in my own practice, at night, my meditation, I offer, if I died tonight, I would have no regrets in the way I lived my life. That's a pretty fucking good cookie.
It's fucking great.
Yeah. With that, thank you everybody for being here to, we were gonna
Sorry.
Make it quick. We'll make it quick.
I was going to ask a question, I guess, and I appreciate this a lot. I kind of feel like that gal was up here before. I probably should be in therapy with her. I graduated in 1977, and I'm 66 years old, and in my life, we had a few token black people who won't hardly even, they don't even come to the high school reunions anymore, and now I finally get it. You know, it's been a long process. I do consider myself a well-meaning liberal. And now it's just like, what the hell do we do?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, God, it was supposed to be going. Things were getting better. We had the Civil Rights Amendment. We had all these good things going.
Yeah.
And it's all been ripped away out from under us. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, you know?
Yes, yes. And what is beautiful,
I say, y'all don't make it easy. I mean, I've tried to reach out. They say, go and help those communities, and you try to go do it. And I feel like I will only be accepted maybe if I cut off my right arm or my left leg or something. I feel like y'all need me to suffer. And trust me, I'm so glad like you took the time off while we were out there. Let us do that work for you. We need to do it. And I'm okay with that. But we need you as friends. I've tried so many times to make friends in those communities. And it's hard. You don't trust us. I don't know what else I can do for you to trust us. But when the gal that we voted as the Daffodil Princess in Puyallup, Washington, the first black gal, told me, wow, you know, the high school reunion at Roy General Store, I didn't know if it was safe to go there. And I was like in tears. Really? Oh my God, you wouldn't come because you didn't feel safe? It's just, where do we go from here? We got to get back on track. Anyway.
yeah. What I love is that, or what I can thank you for, is that offering of real emotion. That's a beginning. That frustration, that anger, that I would offer is a necessary first step. As Ruchika talked about, it's not the same, right? And yet, for my dearest friends, I need you to be able to sit with my anger. I need you to be able to sit with my frustration.
Yes.
Like any good relationship, that's our couples counseling. We're working across difference. We're wading into the unknown. We're healing generational wounds that we've carried in ourselves. And so that not knowing is okay. I don't know, you don't know, we don't know together. That lack of trust is okay. My heart's been broken. My heart's been broken by a society that told me I don't love you. And I'm going to make that known to you every day in small, subtle ways. And in our relationship, in our loving, you've become the face of my aggressor. Like any couple, we bring the baggage to the relationship, and then we get to decide, can we unpack it together? And so I think for me, in my work and with leaders that I see really making transformation in this space, it is, are we brave enough to practice the art of loving, which is complicated shit. It requires respect. It requires trust. It requires care. It requires all these things that many of us didn't receive in our own childhoods. But if we can do that, if we can love, then you can sit when I tell you, you gave me that crown, but you didn't give me safety. You showed up, you brought some potato salad, even though I told you not to the cookout, right? But then I got to hold you accountable for this thing you said at the cookout, right? Like, we're learning how to love one another. And that is scary, worthwhile shit. Is any of that useful?
I'm going to try to make.
Where's Claire? Claire's going to yell at me. One more.
I know, like as soon as you mention the word liberal, like automatically an image pops into my head. It's usually somebody who's white, who probably votes Democrat, who watches The Wire, and
Specific.
So
We had his dear wife who was mourning his death on Unlearning once. So yeah, go on.
yeah, I was wondering, and also like gentrifier, right? And that means somebody who, we know what that means, coming in, taking over a neighborhood and putting your Black Lives Matter sign up in your window or your T-shirt or on your lawn, right? I was wondering, is it possible to be a gentrifier other than being white and Democrat and whatever? Like, can we be gentrifiers in places that we don't even occupy physical space? Example, like having a cell phone, right? Knowing that I know who mines that cobalt and so forth, right? Yet I don't mind going to AT&T, spending my money or paying that bill or whatever, and I'm kind of contributing to it, and kind of indirectly, or to Gaza. I just learned like Boeing makes bombs. I thought they just made planes, right? And yet I love to fly and travel, and I'm like, all right, am I contributing to this? Am I being, in my own way, a gentrifier?
Yes.
Even though I don't look like Joel, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Is
Yes.
that a valid
Is
question?
is it being a gentrifier, or is it contributing
yeah,
to,
right.
late stage capitalism, which is colonialism, which is racism, which is all the things?
Right.
Yeah.
I think this is
Or
the
being that
shadow.
six-figure techie.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the shadow of our entanglement, right? That we are so inextricable from our environments and our systems. Like these lights right now, it's powered by hydropower. How do we get that? It's a dam. It blocked, like, you know what I mean? Like, think about the damage that was done, the destructive and the harm, right? The phone is a great example.
And I hate
Fossil fuel cars. Like, I mean, we participate in all of these things. And I think it's the shadow of our inextricable entanglement. And so I think the fact that you're aware of that that's the first step, just becoming aware of those entanglements. Absolutely, it's a beautiful thing. And then when you start to see not only the shadow side of your entanglements, but the positive, healthy entanglements, and you can start to now move and shift that energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to encourage you all to get on the list. You are seeing a book that is not even out yet. Oh my goodness. You saw it first at Unlearning. Rejecting Competition to Unlock Success. Uncompete will be out this November. And there will be a book talk on Unlearning Book Club later this month, but also here for the official book launch in November. So I expect to join you in the audience as we all come to celebrate the debut of her second book.
Thank you.
Backstage, we were working on trying to force Joel to write
Yes.
a book, so we look forward to that debut, and I will
You
let
said
you
it
know.
here, it'll
Yes,
manifest. You
from
said it
God's
here.
lips to Joel's
Pen.
laptop. Yes.
Laptop.
Thank you
And yours.
all for being here, for being present here. This has had to have been one of the most quiet
Yeah.
episodes of Unlearning ever. Everybody was like, oh my God, please don't look at me, please don't look at me. I know she's talking about me. But you waded into the discomfort and you're still fucking alive. Look at
Yeah.
you.
Amazing.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsey. Thank you.